2023 FDOT Design Manual, FDM 114, Resurfacing, Rehabilitation, and Restoration, presented by Dwayne Carver, AICP. FDM 114 was greatly restructured in 2022, incorporating requests and feedback from the district safety administrators and other stakeholders, and also incorporating direction from the Secretary's vision for department-wide safety. After the rollout of FDM 114 in 2022, there was a need for some minor edits, which will be reviewed in this presentation, and also a slight shift in focus. FDM 114 recognizes that 3R projects have different constraints and considerations compared to other types of projects, such as new construction or reconstruction. The chapter is intended to clarify these differences between 3R projects and other types of projects. The changes made in 2023 continue the increased emphasis on safety that was introduced in the 2022 FDM 114 changes. It also provides some clarification and additional flexibility compared to the changes introduced in the 2022 FDM. This presentation focuses on the differences between what was introduced in 2022 and the changes that were made for 2023 FDM 114. The edits made to FDM 114 are few, but they are significant. Some of the most important are found in FDM 114.1.1, which is the beginning of the chapter. We're going to walk through each one of these. One of the biggest changes that we made was to remove some redundant language. For instance, this word required in the title of the section is really not needed. As it says in the first sentence of the section, 3R projects must meet the FDM Part 2 criteria and requirements, so it's kind of redundant to say it again in the title of the section there, so that word has been struck. An additional change that was made was to remove the requirement for a director level sign-off for if you can't do the items that are described in the paragraph below. This language, when it was further researched, actually it was brought over from the plans preparation manual, and we had questions about it after it rolled out in 2022 and decided that it really was not that helpful to have it there, and so it was kind of repeating some old thinking and old information from the plans preparation manual, so it really could just be removed, so we removed it. All this really did was sort of create an additional layer of authorization above the design variation and exception process, and that's already very well covered in the FDM, so we really didn't need to have this director sign off. So that's been removed, and hopefully will streamline the use of this chapter and the development of 3R project. We did add some information to make sure that safety continues to be a focus in the FDM and FDM 114 on 3R projects. This first section here says to provide improvements recommended by the safety assessment described in FDM 114.3.2.2. We're going to talk more about that safety assessment in just a moment, but that is a change that was made, and we'll talk about that a little more in just a moment. And here's some additional redundant language that was struck for paragraphs 2 and 3, requiring you to provide new or existing pedestrian and bicycle facilities. That's already required in the FDM, so there was really no need to state it here again. Now, if you are on a project and there are any project-specific facilities like this that need to be upgraded or improved and they make their way into the safety assessment, then you would have to go back and look at them more specifically. But in general, you have to provide these types of facilities already as part of the FDM, and if you can't provide them, you have to do a variation to not provide those facilities. So it really was redundant to have this information in there. So again, we took this out to try to streamline the chapter a little bit and avoid confusion about asking you to do things that you've already been asked to do. The last modification that was made to this section is relatively minor. What it's doing is clarifying that when we tell you that you have to do meet an ADA requirement on a project, we're talking specifically about the FDM related ADA requirements. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a large and very complex law. It deals with all kinds of things beyond just transportation. A lot of it deals with architectural requirements and things like this that we don't even get into at FDOT and in the FDM. And so just to make sure that there's no confusion about that, this language was modified to say you have to comply with the FDM requirements associated with the Americans with Disabilities Act when you do your 3R project. Again, this is really a clarification, not a major change. So the safety assessment, FDM 114.3.2.2, So we updated a few things here. There was a reference previously to the Safety Needs List dashboard, and that has been simplified to just the Safety Assessment dashboard. What that dashboard is, it's an internal application that FDOT uses to keep track of potential safety needs on our facilities. And if you have a need for a safety intervention on a facility, it would go on that list. And then ideally, when we have a project, we can go back and look at that list and see if there's anything on there that would need to be done that we could take care of as part of your project. So really, what we're using this for is to help us assess the safety of a corridor. And so the thinking was that name really should reflect more what goes on. And so it's now the Safety Assessment Dashboard. So that actually then corresponds to the safety assessment itself, which is something that is done as part of the 3R design process. And it turns out there's been a little bit of confusion about this. The section of Chapter 114 where this is located is within the part that talks about how you design the 3R project. But it's not the intent that you would wait until design and then start all the things that are listed in this section here, 114.3.2.2. The intent is that a lot of this already needs to have been done before the 3R project even rolls around. If you wait until then, it may be too late to do some of these things. And so the intent is that you'll be working with your district safety administrator, your district safety engineer, again, keeping an eye on the safety assessment dashboard and all those things to make sure that you know as a designer what's already going to be needed in this project. And this is really a chance to just make sure you've pulled all that information into your design, and then you can begin designing accordingly. So hopefully that will relieve some of the confusion around this safety assessment need. This is not requiring the designer to go back and redo all this work. It's really more a matter of pulling in the work that's already been done and make sure it gets accurately and adequately associated in the design and incorporated into the design of the project. Another thing we added to this section is a little note, because the safety assessment dashboard is an internal FDOT application. If you don't work for FDOT, you're not going to be able to get access to it. And so folks would ask, we actually have a lot of consultants who do this work for us, and so they would come looking for this and they couldn't find it. And so we made notes in here to say that you need to go to the district traffic safety engineer to obtain information from this dashboard if you need it to complete your work. So that was added to the chapter to help clarify that. The rest of the changes to the chapter are a lot of housekeeping for the most part. We removed a reference here to the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, which is now covered differently, and so that terminology no longer is relevant, and so that's been removed in section 114.3. And in 114.3.5, we removed, again, these redundant references telling you that you have got to go and do bicycle pedestrian features. That's already understood in the FDM. We don't need to say that again. However, because we removed that those lines that you see there in blue with the strike through, we had referred to those lower down. So now we had to change this to say, to explain when we say these, that's what we meant by that. So when we say these things, we mean bicycle, pedestrian, or transit features or facilities in the project development. So that, again, is just kind of a housekeeping measure to clean up the chapter and remove some of the redundancy that's in there and streamline things a little bit. This, again, when you are doing your project development and your project scoping, you may find that there are features like this that need to be included. That's the right way to get them into the project. We don't need to tell you to go, do something that's already in the FDM. You're already required to do that. So if there are specific things that come out of the project development process, maybe you need to add a mid-block crossing, maybe you need to widen a sidewalk or provide some other pedestrian or bicycle feature, then that will be identified as part of the project scoping and development to supplement what's already required to be done in the FDM. So hopefully that will be more clear with the way that it's been put into FDM 114. So in summary, we clarified that 3R projects must meet the criteria found throughout the FDM. We removed that requirement for the director's sign-off, and because it had been brought over from the earlier plans preparation manual, we're not really sure that that's a useful requirement anymore, so that's been pulled out. We increased the need for safety considerations by incorporating the safety assessment section and kind of beefing that up a little bit, and I tried to explain in this presentation how that assessment section is meant to be used as part of your project design. And we did update the name of the safety assessment dashboard. and we removed some obsolete language for drainage and a few other housekeeping things. We added this recognition also that needs may be identified at other stages of project development besides field review. That's what I was saying, when you're developing the project, and ideally even before the project has even been conceived, perhaps, you've already become aware that there are bicycle, pedestrian, safety, drainage, whatever the needs might be, that are kind of floating out there, and then when the project comes along, you may have a way to meet those needs. If you have any questions about this information, here's my contact information.